can't talk about all the possibilities out there because we don't have time for that, but I can talk a little bit about, we do see a lot of people with on-prem ERP applications, and they are looking at taking their applications and moving them to the cloud, basically outsourcing the infrastructure. And for many, that's the best ROI. That makes sense to them, and that's an advantage. And I've got a slide here. This is after Ultra Consulting. I changed the graphic a little bit to serve what I want to say about this. Cloud means a lot of different things to other people. Hosting is hosting, and hosting is not necessarily the cloud. And let me try to describe that a little bit by using this chart. Number one, in the third row down there, there's an acronym BYOL, and that means bring your own licenses. And what that really means is if you own an on-prem application, that's not really going to be cloud, but you can almost get to the cloud because you can have other people host your application for you. We're doing a lot of that with our partner Redfair International overseas. We're also doing it with Oracle directly. But we have other people like ERP Suites, and we have a number of people that we host our clients on. But hosting is not really in the cloud per se, because hosting is an on-prem application. You own the software, and you are leasing out the infrastructure underneath it. True cloud requires that basically the ERP vendor themselves are the ones that are hosting your product. And that's probably the simplest way to think of hosting and the difference between that and cloud. One of the things that we'll talk about later is update control, so I won't cover this now, but I will talk a little bit about, second to the bottom there in the categories is tenancy. A lot of people are worried about going to the cloud because they're worried about the fact that they don't want their data being on a database and their applications being in an environment with a bunch of other people. The security of that just does not work for them. And while I can understand some of those concerns, I'm not sure they're completely valid, but what I will say is the cloud marketplace has responded to that, and there is the ability to be single tenant in a cloud environment. In fact, all of the cloud providers do that. That's not as cost effective for them, and therefore the pricing is not as price effective for you. But single tenant is common, and all of them, well, I don't want to say all of them, most of them can provide single tenant and will take you in that direction if that's the way you want to go. As cloud advances, as the marketplace will allow, I think we will see multi-tenant. And personally, I don't have an issue with multi-tenant. I understand how they can segregate the data and how they can segregate the apps, but everybody has to get comfortable with that before we go there. But do know that single tenant is out there, is a possibility, and you can do that today. And that is probably the most common model that we see people going to, but I do think multi-tenant is going to be our future. When you're looking at these opportunities for how we could leverage the cloud, there's a couple. Hosting your on-prem app, we kind of talked about that there on the past slide. However, you don't have to do all of it. What we're seeing is a lot of customers, there's two particular scenarios that we see a lot of. They're taking their non-production environments, their development, their test environments, and they're dipping their toe into cloud by just putting those up into a cloud environment, seeing what that looks like, and leaving their production down on-prem. That's one thing we see a lot of. The other is, and I think this is a really intriguing idea, especially for our mid-market clients, is disaster recovery or business continuity, however you want to put it, but putting your disaster recovery environment out on the cloud. Putting up, again, a full environment. Some might just use a database, but most people they'll just put a whole environment out on the cloud as their backup that will be, physically nowhere near their primary data center. Still located in the country where they need to operate for reasons of their own making. But the point is that it's an opportunity to get you away from any kind of a natural disaster that could impact your current data recovery operation as well as your primary production environment. We're seeing people look at that more and more, and we think that's going to become more and more popular, and it's a great way, again, to kind of dip your toe into the cloud environment. And also new business acquisitions. We're seeing a lot of customers who are interested in if they're starting up a small operation or they're acquiring a new business, one of the simplest ways to get moving forward is to take their on-prem solution or move to a cloud solution and just put that business up on that. When we talk about integrating cloud applications with your on-prem, again, we're seeing new functionality, new capabilities. I did talk about the Oracle Cloud, Financial Cloud application, but there are others. You know, we're seeing customers. We have a customer right now that is upgrading their J.D. Edwards environment, and they're going to move to the Oracle Procurement Cloud because of the sourcing capabilities. They had a need for some new functionality in that arena, some more robust solution. They liked the Oracle product, and so while they're keeping J.D. Edwards, they're going to take J.D. Edwards, they're going to move it up onto the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, and then they're going to integrate in the Oracle Procurement Cloud product. We see other people doing the same thing with Human Capital Cloud. Probably the most prevalent one that we see where we've got on-premise software, but they're using the planning and budgeting, the EPCBS product, and integrating that in so they can do their planning and budgeting over the cloud. And all of these things are possible. The cloud software can, of course, do all of the kinds of integrations that you're used to doing, but they also have the ability to, they're very robust with web services. And so real-time integration through web services, that's the standard that they operate to. They can go backwards and do more batch-based, file-based kinds of integrations. But if you want to move forward on web services, this is probably the best tool and the most prevalent tool. And of course, this is where the development community has moved to, and your resources need to be up on speed on the web services. Other things to consider when you're trying to evaluate the opportunities. Again, we've talked a little bit about the functionality. I don't want to get onto that too much, but I will say that I do think the user interfaces are getting much better, even for the on-prem applications. And the cloud-based applications started with these new user interfaces. Again, not just trying to pound data onto a screen, but trying to show what content needs to be reacted to, providing alerts, providing workflow, the ability to access information very readily. You know, this is what people have always been looking for, and just by the nature of these new interfaces, I think we're seeing better functionality. Hard to measure the value of that, but I think you all recognize there's a value in having those kinds of the kind of access to information. The cost reductions, again, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you know, again, people are looking for the economies of scale that come with cloud. Upgrades is one of those areas where some see this as a positive and some see it as a negative. If you're using the infrastructure as a service, if you're just using that, then you're going to get constant upgrades to your environment that you won't have to do anything to do. They will go on in the background, and they will go on without you noticing them. If you have a cloud ERP application, what the vendors are doing typically is that they are upgrading that application regularly. The way it works with Oracle, basically with the Oracle Cloud product, is about every 6 months they're coming out with a new release, with new functionality. If that release impacts you, if there's new functionality that is relevant to your footprint, then they give you roughly about 6 months to do some regression testing before you put up that upgrade. But they do expect you to put the upgrade up, and you need to do it before the next upgrade after that. So if you're on release 13 and they've come out with release 14, you have to get 14 installed before 15 comes out about 6 months later. So you have a 6-month window. And again, regression testing, I don't mean to minimize that. I think that you know, that's an effort that not everybody wants to go through, and I understand that. But if you want to see the advantages of the new functionality that's coming out, it's a routine that you get into. And while we've seen a number of clients that have been concerned with it, once you get the routine started, we see that clients are adapting to this really quite easily. And I realize that it's a tough sell when you're talking about business users having to get involved in regression testing, but also if you do the implementation and you have the right test scripts and such, the regularity of doing it every 6 months makes it easier to get the upgrades done. And as I talked about with infrastructure, the other thing, security. I learned something when I was at the Collaborate, the Oracle Collaborate event. One of the things they quoted was, with regards to security, of all the data breaches that were recorded, basically over 50% of them were preventable, that the security patch was available, it just had not been deployed. Because while it might have been somebody's job, that person probably also has 3 or 4 other jobs, and they just didn't get to it. Maybe they didn't know that it was available. But when it comes to security and when it comes to uptime, I think we actually, we need to kind of make a shift here, because while everyone probably has very good resources, and those resources do everything they can to secure the environment at all levels, at the application level as well as at the database level and everything in between. Having dedicated resources that are solely doing security has its advantages. And in the current environments and all of the fears of getting hacked that I think we all live with if you're involved in systems, it's not clear to me that keeping it on-prem is really going to be that much more secure, because everyone's got access to the internet, and no matter what your firewall looks like, it seems like there's abilities to get past that. Some of them quite clever, some of them kind of mundane, but the point is people can get past it. So you've got to have the patches in place, and that is actually, I think, an advantage of these cloud products over what we have on-prem in many instances. Right now, if you're in discrete manufacturing, professional services, or banking, those are the drivers. Those are the industries where you're going to see competitors that are moving forward very, very quickly. You can expect that. We're also seeing, we're doing a lot of work with project-based service providers. We're doing a lot of work with financial service clients, wholesale distributors, and industrial discrete manufacturers, industrial product manufacturers. Those are the industries that we're doing our cloud work in. So it is everywhere, but again, here's 3 that we learned from industry analysts are leading the way. And I don't think there's any surprises there, especially the banking. You know, they have the scaling challenge that is so important to them. So the message, I think, is that this is happening now. People are making these moves now, and if you haven't had the opportunity to move forward on the cloud, we're going to encourage you to do so. It's something very much to consider. And again, this all comes down, it's always dollars in the end that we need to look at as a part of any of our decisions on this. And what I wanted to say is, I do think that the opportunity for lower costs exist. I don't think it's black and white, because of course, any of the on-prem solutions, any of the hosting solutions, they're cost conscious. They see what's going on in the cloud, and they try and provide an offering that is going to be competitive. But the good news is that all of the costs are coming down because of the competition. So that's good for all of us. One thing I can say, though, for sure is that when it comes to return on investment, we can shift costs from capital to expense with subscription services to cloud-based services as opposed to buying capital. You don't have the upfront licensing costs. There's no question that that's true. You can reduce that cost, but you know, you're paying maintenance fees on your on-prem, and when you compare those maintenance fees to the licensing cost for the cloud service, depending on your particular situation, you'll often see cost reductions, but I can't tell you categorically that all of you would, but it's certainly a point to look at. I think more difficult to measure, but perhaps more important, is the fact that we can modernize processes. We can make the business more efficient, and ultimately, that's what's going to be required of all of us, and you want to be out in front of that. You know, one of the things we have clients tell us about, they're worried about getting caught short, and all of a sudden the business demands something be done very, very quickly on a time frame that isn't really practical, and that's a challenge. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up. And of course, all of us, Ultra, Terillium, any number of other folks that work in our space along with us, we're interested in having that conversation with you. You know, If you want to talk about it, we're here to have that conversation. We're glad to tell you what our experiences has been. We're glad to introduce you to our customers who are happy with what they've been able to accomplish in the cloud. If you want to take the time to do that, we're ready for you.